What's going on YouTube and welcome to Courtside Today with your host Sepu Navasarchan. The NBA is finally back and I've decided to start a show where we talk about one or maybe two topics every video. We will talk about teams, we will talk about players, trades, games, whatever it is, we will tackle it then. As you can read in the title, today we will be talking about the Milwaukee Bucks and how they haven't been using their biggest weapon, the Dame and Giannis pick and roll. We will talk about what's going wrong for Coach Adrian Griffin, Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetkounmpo themselves. But before we jump into the video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe as it helps the channel out more than you know, more than even I know, because I've never done this. So let's jump into it. So let's start off with head coach Adrian Griffin. Before we start with Coach Griffin, let's remember that he's a rookie head coach and I'm not necessarily judging him on his level of play yet. The defense doesn't look great, the offense doesn't look great, but it doesn't have to 3 games into the season. It will take time with a new coach and new players. I don't expect it to look good right away and it isn't looking good. But there are some things that should be better right now. They should be better immediately and they should be fixed ASAP. And starting off is the rotations. The rotations haven't been great at all, as sometimes Dame and Giannis aren't even being staggered. Staggering means that at least one of the 2 players should be on the court at all times, as sometimes we have seen lineups without Dame and Giannis. Now they have been for short periods of time, as coach has seen that they haven't worked. When you have 2 superstars, especially 2 superstars who are offensive engines like Dame and Giannis, they should always be staggered. There's no excuse for them to play lineups without Dame or without Giannis. It just doesn't make sense. Dame is a great point guard out of the pick and roll and can make an entire team go like that, creating open shots for them, hitting the big man, giving them easy looks at the basket, and even pulling up for himself and creating 3-point opportunities. Giannis Antetkounmpo can drive to the basket and create easy looks for his team by that just by kicking out. One of the 2 should always be on the floor at all times. But with the Milwaukee Bucks, it's even more different, because they don't only have 2 superstars, they also have 2 elite perimeter players that should be staggered in Dame and Chris Middleton. If one of the 2 sits, the other should be on the floor at all times. If not, you lose that perimeter presence. And they also have 2 great defensive bigs, defensive player of the year level in Giannis and Brook Lopez. If one of the 2 sits, the other should be on the court at all times. If the Bucks follow that logic, they come out on 2 very logical lineups. Dame and Brook Lopez always together when Giannis sits, and Chris Middleton and Giannis always together when Dame sits. That way, you keep a perimeter threat, but you also keep that inside presence on D. You won't dip below a certain level on offense and you won't dip below a certain level on defense, and it will be good enough to attack opposing benches. This hasn't been happening for the Bucks. Dame has played a lot of his minutes with Bobby Portis and without Brook Lopez. Now, this is no shade to Bobby Portis at all. I love Bobby. He's been playing amazing basketball this season. But I want Dame to be on the floor with Brook Lopez at all times if Giannis is not out there. You need one of those top elite defenders in the league on the floor at all times. If you have 2, it doesn't make sense to go lineups without any of them. And Bobby Portis will have enough minutes to go around because there's 96 minutes at both power forward and center position. And if you split that by 3, Giannis, Brook Lopez, and Bobby Portis, that's 32 minutes. That's more than enough. That's more than they're playing right now. Jay Crowder will also play some power forward, which kind of lessens the load, but there's enough minutes for Bobby and there's enough minutes for Dame and Brook Lopez to always play together when Giannis sits. Now, enough about rotations. There's another thing that Adrian Griffin is doing that isn't working, and that is the pick and roll, the topic of this video. The last 2 games, we've barely seen any pick and roll after it worked so well in the first game. They had an insane offensive rating in the pick and roll and an outrageous offensive rating when they used the horn sets, basically 2 pick and rolls, top of the key for Dame to utilize with Brook Lopez and Giannis setting the screens. It was great in game 1. Game 2, they didn't go to it at all, especially that first half, and we saw how Dame struggled. He didn't get a single point in that first half, looked horrendous, a lot of predetermined passes, everything was going wrong. I don't know why they shied away from it, but it clearly wasn't working. Even in the last game against the Heat, they decided to opt more for the Giannis drives. I could understand that. Kevin Love and Thomas Bryant were the opposing front court, Bam Adebayo was out, but still, you should work on those principles in the PNR because that will be their biggest weapon this year. Now we also have to remember that Terry Stotts was appointed as the assistant coach to Adrian Griffin and was basically in the function of being the offensive coordinator. He left before the season even started, and we know that Terry Stotts has been a pick and roll heavy guy from his time in Portland. Now, it has been reported that he left because there was kind of a spat with head coach Adrian Griffin, But I wondered if he maybe left because he felt like he didn't have enough control to run the pick and roll in that offense, and maybe felt that Adrian Griffin was shying away from the pick and roll too much. That could be. I hope it's not the case because that would be kind of devastating for the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, it's not only the Dame and Giannis pick and roll. Dame can also run pick and rolls with Brook or with Bobby Portis. That's basically a three-headed monster to run pick and rolls with, and I don't know why they shied away from it that much. Instead, what we've seen is way too much useless ball movement. Now, before you attack me, I never call ball movement useless. Ball movement is very good, but it's kind of useless when you do it without forcing switches, without forcing help, without forcing open looks. If you just pass the ball when you're covered to another guy who's covered without even forcing anything, that doesn't really help, and that's what was happening. Dame wasn't creating anything, and he was just throwing the ball to Malik Beasley, who was also covered. I don't know how that helps. They need to call way more PNR. Head coach Adrian Griffin needs to call way more PNR, and that will force help, and they can play out of that. Next up, we have Damian Lillard, who came out extremely aggressive in game 1, and he was amazing in that game. He was calling for picks. He was calling for horn actions, and he was turning the corner and getting to the rim basically every time, getting 17 free throws in the process, knocking them all down, having 0 turnovers, and finishing with 39 points. He looked amazing. And then he comes out in game 2 against the Atlanta Hawks, and he is extremely passive, and he looks the worst I've ever seen him play. He was just throwing the ball nonchalantly, might I add. As he crossed half court immediately, he was just picking up his dribble and throwing the ball to Malik Beasley. I don't know why he was doing that. He's the point guard of this team. He needs to speak up and say, I need those pick and rolls. The thing is, maybe he didn't want to call for as much screens in game 2 because he saw how much energy he had to exert in game 1. And from his time in Portland, I know that Damian Lillard doesn't like having to exert that much energy. He likes scoring points, of course. He likes being an offensive machine, but he doesn't like having to do that every time. And maybe it was like, now I'm on the Bucks. I have help. I don't need to be running pick and roll all the time for me to get open or for the team to have a chance. So let me just chill this game and see how that works. It's game 2 of the season. Might very well be that that was his mindset going into that game and just saying, okay, maybe it can also work if I'm more off the ball. I don't know. But we'll see. And I hope he starts calling more for the pick and roll, starts being that vocal leader that we've seen him be in Portland. And then last but not least, we have Giannis Antetkounmpo. I don't know what was the biggest lie Giannis told this summer. Whether it was that he signed a contract without looking at the number, or whether it was that he was going to let Dame be the point guard and the leader of this team. But so far, it hasn't looked the case at all. He has had the ball in his hands way too much, looking to drive, of course. And he has been kind of okay in those drives, kind of efficient finishing at the rim, but he has been getting a lot of turnovers out of those plays. He hasn't been assisting the ball well out of those plays either, kicking the ball out to his teammates. And it looked very bad in game 1, looked kind of better in game 2, where it was basically the only source of offense, but I felt like the problem was in game 2 that they didn't run enough pick and roll. So the offense kind of looked bad, except Giannis finishing at the rim. Everything outside of that looked bad. And then last game against the Miami Heat, it looked way easier. It was way easier to barrel his way through that wall because they had Kevin Love and Thomas Bryant starting, two not great defenders at this point in their careers. I don't think it would have been the same story against Bam Adebayo, for example. And then when he doesn't drive, he has been shooting way too many jump shots. I don't know why. First game, he took 8 jump shots. Last game, he took a couple of threes as well and a couple of mid-ranges, turnaround jumpers even, fadeaways, whatever it is. But he needs to phase those out of his game, man. He's not a shooter. He's been trying for 10 years. He's not a shooter. The defense will not be honest on him. I know that's what they're trying to do, keeping the defense honest. The defense will never be honest on Giannis trying to shoot a jump shot. That's exactly what they want. And that's exactly what the Bucks shouldn't want. They don't want Giannis shooting jump shots. And the way you do that is by taking the ball out of his hands more, man. Like, don't let him create every time. He has to be off ball more. And that's why it's so surprising to me that he hasn't been willing to set screens for Damian Lillard. He said he will be willing to set 50 screens a game. He hasn't been doing that at all. And even when he's set them, they have been very, very bad and lazy picks. They're kind of like these shadow screens where you don't really set a hard screen. You immediately dash to the rim. And those don't really create switches. They don't create mismatches. They don't create doubles. They don't create hedges. The defender just stays with Damian Lillard and Giannis's defender stays with him. It's nothing special that happens out of that play. Now, the shadow screens could work when Giannis is dashing to the rim and Dame just throws it kind of over the top when he's attacking the rim. Could work a few times a game maybe, but the thing is they would work better if you first keep the defense honest with those hard screens, where you basically force them to switch, force them to double, force them to hedge, whatever it is, force them to play even drop, and then everything will open up for the team. Even for those shadow screens won't work unless you first go hard screens. And it's like Giannis hasn't realized yet that when he's in the pick and roll with Dame, he can go downhill. When he goes downhill with a drive with the ball in his hands, Damian Lillard can't be running the pick and roll. Damian Lillard is just an off-ball player. But when you have that Damian Lillard-Giannis pick and roll, both are involved in that action. Both your superstars are involved in that action, like the Nuggets do, the two-man game. I don't know how many times I've heard that during the NBA Finals and throughout the entire players. Oh, the Nuggets two-man game, the Nuggets two-man game. It's because the two-man game is amazing. They use their two best players to basically generate the entire offense. And that's what the Bucks need to be doing. And I don't know why they are shying away from it. And then the last point I wanted to make is that the Dame pick and roll in his years in Portland has been amazing. Always has Portland been at the top of the rankings with the Dame pick and roll, even though he has had average teammates. The Bucks, with Giannis driving, haven't had that great of an offense, while he has had way better teammates than Damian Lillard. So it speaks volumes as to which play is more efficient. And the Dame pick and roll, as we said, can involve Giannis. Giannis driving is just everyone standing around on the perimeter. So that's what they need to be using. The Dame and Giannis pick and roll, followed by the Dame and Brook pick and roll, and then maybe Giannis driving to the basket as a kind of tertiary play. So that was it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe, because more content will be coming from this channel very soon. And I'll catch you next time. Bye!